Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the New Hartford Public Schools Special Board of Education meeting today, August 24th. I'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock p.m. Before we open with the pledge, I would like to add communication to the board to the agenda, unless there is opposition to do so, for the purpose of acknowledging the 52 pieces of communication that I have and the board has received. I don't intend on reading every 52 pieces of communication, so we'll be here till tomorrow, but I do want to acknowledge those and let the public know that we have received and the board has been forwarded those communications. So is there any opposition to doing so? No? Okay. So with that, we'll move on to the pledge, and I'll ask everybody to stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So before we get started tonight, I do want to say a few words on behalf of the board. This is something I had a chance to write up while I was away on vacation. This plan to reopen or plan to open is no doubt the most debated topic that this board has seen. We have heard from people on both sides of the issue, and it is without a doubt controversial. Tonight, I ask that board members be respectful of our administration, our staff, and of each other. There are people on both sides of this issue, and our job as this board is to be respectful of all opinions, regardless of how we feel personally about the subject at hand. I also ask that those in the crowd be respectful of the board and the business that we are here to conduct tonight. We came here with a job to do. Please hold any and all comments, cheers, boos, applause, etc. When the night is over, I expect some folks will be happy, some will be upset. Either way, each of us needs to respect each board member and their vote. Aggressive, threatening, and negative commentary on any platform, whether it be face-to-face, text message, phone calls, or social media, should not and will not be tolerated. Finally, I ask that we be respectful of each other. We are a close-knit community. Most of us are friends. Regardless of what happens tonight, we'll still all see each other at Wednesday night concerts at Brody Park, Sunday football games at Browns, or just having a beer at Legitimates. We need to be an example for our children because they are watching us. Let us set the tone for their future. Thank you. So with that said, noting on communication, as I already stated, the board has received 52 emails/letters. The board has been forwarded all those emails and letters. I have received them. I have personally responded to most of the emails to let these folks know that I have received the emails and they have been forwarded to the board. I'm trying to get to the last remaining few. 52 in a matter of a couple of days is not the easiest thing to get back to. So I will respond, but I want to reassure everybody that emailed us a communication that it has been forwarded to the board and it has been received and will be a matter of public record of tonight's meeting. So with that said, we can move into the reopening plan for this school year. Brian, do you have anything you want to add, or do you want to kick it off for us?
I'll kick it off. Thank you, Tim. Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to present the New Hartford Public Schools reopening plan for 2021-2022. As you have the plan in front of you, the first piece as far as universal and correct wearing of masks. Face coverings or masks are required indoors for all vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals based on Executive Order number 13A. There will be mask breaks. Parents will be responsible for providing students with face coverings or masks. We also do have backup masks, and once again, masks will be required on buses as well. The second mitigation strategy deals with physical distancing and cohorting. Students will maintain a social distancing of 3 feet in the classroom to the greatest extent practical as part of a layered mitigation strategy. We'll continue to monitor the state's physical distancing recommendations. If there are any changes to the recommendations, the district will adapt its policies accordingly. This is a change from last year. Last year was 6 feet, now it's 3 feet. So this will lessen the amount of quarantining for our students and our staff. So we're very pleased about that. I do want to be clear, that doesn't mean that there will not be any quarantining. That does not mean that. There'll be just less quarantining, which is a positive thing to keep kids in school. Hand washing. Once again, we'll continue frequent hand washing or hand sanitizing as expected. We will continue to promote hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette between and after activities, including location change, mealtime, bathroom use, and throughout the building. The next piece is the cleaning and maintaining healthy facilities, including improving ventilation. We'll continue to meet high cleanliness standards and maintain a high level of cleanliness during the school year. Our custodians did a fantastic job over the past year, and they will continue to do so, and they're preparing for the school year starting next Monday. We'll continue to do routine cleaning of classrooms, bathrooms, and all additional locations within the building to maintain a healthy environment. We used very appropriate signing in the hallways. We'll continue to do that. And all of our existing air filters have been replaced and upgraded with the MERV air filters. Contact tracing in combination with isolation and quarantine. If a staff, student, or volunteer or visitor has been present in a school and has a confirmed or suspected diagnosis of COVID-19, the school nurse and building principal will contact the superintendent of schools immediately. I will continue, as I did last year, or my designee, to inform the school community if we have a positive case with the student or staff member. That transparency is very important. Quarantine periods for individuals with COVID-19 will be in accordance with state requirements and consultation with the Farmington Valley Health Department. We're in close collaboration with the Farmington Valley Health District every time we have a positive case here. Worked very well with them last year. We'll continue to do so as far as recommendations from the Farmington Valley Health Department. This is another positive. Vaccinated staff will no longer need to quarantine if asymptomatic. And that also goes for students, but as we know, we have a very small slice of our population who's eligible for the vaccine at this time. We will see as we move forward if younger kids will be able to get vaccinated during the course of the school year. As we know, we did close down 2.5 weeks last year, and the main reason was because of staffing issues. We didn't have enough staff. This year, with the vaccine, we looked at we're hopeful that's not going to be a major issue and prevent us from having our schools open. So that's another positive. The determination about individuals who need to quarantine will be made once again in consultation with the Farmington Valley Health Department. If students or staff need to quarantine, the quarantine period will be for 10 days. Next part of the plan, diagnostic screening and testing. Parents will screen their children daily before school to ensure temperatures are appropriate and to observe for symptoms consistent with COVID-19 or have had close contact with the person diagnosed with COVID-19. Once again, we will not be checking students as far as temperature and screening procedures. They're not required. We will not do that again this year. The school nurse, all the nurses did a fantastic job over the past year navigating the pandemic. They will continue to do so. School nurse will monitor screening while complying with relevant privacy laws with the goal of minimizing the risk of spreading the virus. The district will not be conducting testing at this time, COVID-19 testing. That is not a requirement. There are some select school districts who are offering that. We will not be doing that. There's a lot of testing centers around the state and in the area. So if students or staff need to do that, but once again, there's appropriate resources in the area. School nurse will continue to refer students for COVID-19 testing outside of school if symptoms arise. Efforts to provide vaccinations to educators, other staff, and students. If eligible, the district will continue to partner with the Farmington Valley Health District to schedule and provide vaccination clinics for eligible students and staff. Farmington Valley Health District did a fantastic job last year coordinating vaccination clinics for our staff. We had that at Simsbury, one of the elementary schools in Simsbury. It was very successful, and we know that they'll continue to have those vaccination clinics. I did send an email to the staff. Farmington Valley Health District is sponsoring a clinic this Friday in Barkhamsted at the Pleasant Valley Drive-In. So that'll continue throughout the year. Appropriate accommodations for children with disabilities with respect to the health and safety policies. The Director of Student Services and the special education staff will oversee programming and transition back to school for all students with IEPs. PPTs this year will either, it's up to the parent as far as they want to virtual or in person. So we'll offer that option to parents this year. Next page. Continuity of services. And I want to underscore this because I know at this time we were talking about, will our kids be back in school in person for that learning model? That we were there last year. I'm so happy to say that's not even an option as far as not having the kids in school this year. So the kids will be offered in-person, full in-person learning this year. We're excited to have all the kids back offering that. We'll continue to focus on social emotional needs. We understand it's been an extremely difficult year the past year and a half, social and emotionally for our kids. We have approaches with that. We have a ruler approach. It's been very successful, research-based, partnered with Yale University. We'll continue that this year. Our social worker and school psychologist did a fantastic job over the past year. We'll continue to do that and partner with our teachers. I want to be very clear about this. Distance learning or remote learning, which is the same term, will not be offered this year. As I mentioned last Tuesday night, it's very disruptive. It's very difficult for teachers to balance in-person learning and virtual learners. And learners, the kids, end up suffering because of that. I do want to say there will be unique circumstances that we may have to go to distance learning. For instance, if a whole class has to quarantine, we don't think that will be the case. We don't know. Very unpredictable. If a whole school has to close, if there's an outbreak at a school, then we would look at the option for a very short time of distance learning. Once again, those are very unique, but the difference from last year at this time, we're not offering that as an option to parents. And then the plan under public comment, the plan will be to send the welcome back letter to all parents and staff tomorrow with the opening plan tomorrow afternoon. So I don't have any questions.
Brian, on the cleaning and maintenance
Yes.
line there,
Yeah.
is there enough funding? I know we used quite a bit of the COVID relief funds for some other things. Is there enough funding for, overtime, supplies, et cetera?
Yes, we do have enough resources for that, Carl. That's absolutely. If we need to have overtime, yes, we will.
Okay.
Brian, are all employees vaccinated, or what percentage, or is there a mandate to have them vaccinated at some point?
Yeah, so the district sent an email back in the spring as far as inquiring as far as staff, if they were interested in getting vaccinated. So we have a rough estimate about 70% of our staff being vaccinated. They are not required to be vaccinated, obviously, prior to the governor's new directive, new law from last week. But to answer your question, I think we're about 70% at this juncture.
Brian, can you be clear on the vaccination requirement you just talked about? The governor's executive order, or well, I don't think it was an executive order. I think it was. Well, you tell me.
Yes. So it's the governor has mandated that all staff members, teachers included, non-certified staff members as well, have at least one vaccination shot by September 27th, this September 27th. There is an option if staff cannot be vaccinated, they could undergo weekly COVID-19 testing. So that's the option with that. It was very quick. It did catch the educational community by surprise by the governor's decision last week. So there are attorneys that are still sifting through, working with the teachers' unions in Connecticut and the non-certified unions as far as the explicit circumstances around that. But that is the basic gist of the new mandate as far as vaccinations of staff.
The COVID testing that they would have to do if they chose to not be vaccinated, they pay for that? We pay for that?
Yeah,
Insurance covers that?
We would not, at this time, we would not be paying for that, no.
So
It would be up to the employee to pay for
the
that.
employee would pay for it.
Yes. But once again, attorneys are still reviewing that directive from last week.
Okay.
Would you be requiring the volunteers and room parents to be vaccinated? Are they covered? Are they also included in that mandate?
So the attorneys are looking at that, but yes, if they're going to be around kids, working with kids, I think they would need to be vaccinated, yes.
Thank you.
It definitely goes to substitutes, absolutely,
Right.
yes.
I assume that you would just, like with a volunteer or room parent, you would assume that they would tell you the truth and they wouldn't have to show their card? Or would they?
No, there'd be a process with the staff
Okay,
that they would have to show proof of vaccination, yes.
okay, thank you.
So I did have a chance to watch the YouTube video from our last meeting. So I was able to pick up on some of what the board was looking for as far as clarity and interpretation of the executive order, policies in place, and that sort of thing. So obviously, the elephant in the room is masks and what the plan is to do with masks. I have a couple of questions regarding that, and I'm sure there will be folks to piggyback off of that as well. So one of the questions I had was if we do require masks in school, what about the bus stop? So the student is waiting for the bus in the morning, not wearing a mask. Who polices that? Is the student allowed on the bus? What's the procedure going to be for that, Brian?
Sure. Since it's outside, students do not need to wear a mask, as they do not need to wear a mask outside here for recess or physical education or any class here outside. So no one will have to police that. Once again, they will have to wear a mask on the bus. If they don't have a mask, there'll be extra masks provided for students on each bus.
If they refuse a mask getting on the bus,
Then the bus driver will probably not allow them to be on the bus.
do we have confirmation from DACO on that?
Yes,
We do.
yes.
So the student will not be allowed on the bus
Yes.
if they're not going to wear a mask.
Right.
Okay.
And once again, there'll be plenty of extra masks on each bus.
The board had asked about, towards the end of the meeting, consequences for not following mask rules in school. Can you elaborate on that a little bit further?
Sure, I mentioned that last Tuesday. So if a student refuses to wear a mask, once again, we'll have extra masks here in school if a student forgets a mask. If the student is insubordinate and refuses to wear a mask, we'll remove the student from class. We'll bring the student to the principal's office or nurse's office. The principal will call the parent immediately, and the student will need to pick up their child from school, and we will count the day as an absence.
Suspension or anything like that
No,
involved in that?
We're not going to define it as a suspension, no, we're not.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah.
So our policy 5131 is student conduct. And within that opening policy, it states the exercise of any of the student's rights must be weighed against the rights of another individual or group. I would argue that wearing of a mask because of someone else is much more an infringement on the student's rights than claiming potential harm because another student didn't want to wear a mask. That's in our 5131. Also in our 5131, which I have right here, it's 20 some odd pages, talks about all kinds of conduct that warrants in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and expulsion. We've had students in the past physically abuse teachers, disrupt classrooms with with screaming, yelling, and those students were not so much as given detention, never mind suspension. And now you're talking about suspending a kid wholesale for not wanting to wear a mask. No homework. Our rules specifically say no child will be denied homework, schoolwork, or participation in any tests or exams. And we're going to wholesale kick a kid out because they don't want to wear a mask. I have a feeling that would bring some problems to the district. I recommend we revise how we're going to handle kids who don't want to wear masks.
Can you
So, yeah,
expand on that?
yeah, absolutely. So, once again, it's not going to be a suspension, so we'll not fall under some of the information that Thomas provided there. It would infringe on other students as far as their health. It would infringe on that. Yes, students will have the opportunity to make up the work if they're removed from class, and every situation is very unique. And the principal always does their due diligence as far as appropriating proper discipline, and they will continue to do that.
It still doesn't talk about any of our, we have 20 some, like I said, there's 20 some odd pages in here about student conduct. And there's talks about having right to a hearing, parents coming down to have a hearing. Summarily sending a child home for not wearing a mask is nowhere listed in here.
But it's an executive order. There's the
The
difference.
executive order does not talk about how you're going to handle a child who doesn't pay attention to, who does not want to wear a mask. The executive order tells us we need to mandate a mask in school. Got that. Got that.
Okay.
Well, that,
But our exercise, I'm talking, our exercise of how this is enforced, I believe, falls under our jurisdiction. That's why I'm bringing this up. I'm not saying we're going to flaunt the mask rules. Okay, we already went down that road once. I'm not going down there again. But how that gets exercised, I believe, falls under the purview of this board. That's what I'm bringing up.
and that's what I was getting at when I asked the question, because I don't see anything in this reopening plan that talks about that. So do we automatically refer to this policy? Do we need a new policy? Do we add it to our reopening plan? What is your thoughts?
So we definitely do not need a new policy. We definitely do not need a new policy for that. It's not going to be captured in the reopening plan and is not in most districts that I've seen. And once again, I've not seen every district reopening plan, but it's not going to capture every situation in the reopening plan. I see other districts reopening plan, it's a page, it's 2 pages. This is 4 or 5 pages with a lot of explicit information as far as that's concerned. So no, I do not believe the board needs to approve a policy as far as what to do with students who refuse to wear masks.
Well, I, for one, I'm not going to approve a policy that says we're sending the kid home because he doesn't want to wear a mask. That's not anywhere listed in our policies. It's just not.
But the policy was written during the time before any of this had happened.
No, because the policy is updated to include dress code, and our dress code is updated to include masks. We've addressed a lot of these policies since the COVID issue to address the mask. It's actually written in the dress code. Masks are required in our dress code. And within this student discipline, 5131, there's an item that says when you violate the dress code, you falls under this policy.
I don't know that policy off the top of my head, so can you read what the ramifications are if a student does not follow the dress code?
Sure. I can find the dress. I highlighted the word dress, but if you want to give me some latitude,
Mhm.
I will read you. It says in several areas about suspension, hearing procedures, in-school suspension means exclusion from regular classroom activity for no more than 10 consecutive school days, but not exclusion from school, provided such exclusion shall not extend beyond the end of the school year in which such a school suspension was imposed. No student shall be placed in-school suspension more than 15 times for a total of 50 days in one school year. This is the description of in-school suspension. And then when it tells you about how you apply procedures governing in-school suspension may not be imposed on a student without an informal hearing by the building principal or designee. In-school suspension may be served in the school that the student regularly attends or in any other school building within the jurisdiction of the building. And we wrote in here else that we prefer to have the student do the in-school suspension within the building which they attend. The student shall be allowed to complete any classwork, including examinations, without penalty, which he or she missed while under suspension. And it goes on to repeat those procedures several times. Here, there's a hearing procedure about the procedure for the hearing. And again, it repeats itself several times about what the definitions of in-school suspension are, how we prefer to have it served. Talks about out-of-school suspension, principles governing in-school suspension. The principal or designee may impose in-school suspension in cases where a student's conduct endangers persons or property, violates school policy, seriously disrupts the educational process, or in other appropriate circumstances as determined by the principal or designee. In-school suspension may not be imposed on a student without an informal hearing by the building principal or designee. No student shall be placed in school suspension more than 10 times or a total of 25 days in 1 year, whichever results in fewer days of exclusion.
So,
Sounds like you answered your own question.
Well, I didn't have, that's,
well, that's what I'm getting at. So are you advocating that students who don't come to school with a mask on be suspended rather than just sent home?
well, I don't think they need to be summarily sent home with no homework. That doesn't seem like it fits anywhere in this
But
policy.
they won't be, correct?
No, they'll be able to make up the work. But I want to be clear, it's going to be almost impossible for a principal to gather all the work, disrupt the classroom teacher in real time to have work when the child is sent home. But they will be able to make up the work, yes.
So,
But I'm trying to follow you, Tom. Are you actually saying that you don't want, are you saying that children that refuse a mask shouldn't be sent home? Is that
I
what you're
don't think
saying?
our policy covers sending a student home. It doesn't. What Brian
well,
suggested
it
that we're
says that
doing,
they should be suspended. Right.
Well, and that's what was brought up last week when we had the conversation.
but there's,
And
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, and I emailed Brian throughout the week, asking him several different questions. One was where this procedure came from. And Brian, I'll be honest, the first time we ever heard that a student should be able to make up the work was just now.
Mhm.
That was never brought up last week.
Right.
All right? So we have a duty as a board to educate all students. As we look at our policy, we don't have a policy. I asked you, what does the state say? The state doesn't tell us how to administer their
No.
mandate.
No.
Right?
No.
That's what this board should be doing, right? I'll be honest, I mean, not approving this plan because we have no choice. We have no choice with anything in this plan. Where we have a choice is how we enforce it, right? The procedure that follows if someone doesn't follow. But again, we still have to educate every student, right? You know, we have a right in here, again, we talk about mask breaks. This just says mask breaks will be provided. How often? When throughout the day? How is that going to be administered? Those are things that this board should be talking about, right? Last week, and again, I'll be honest, over the last week, we've gotten a lot of information, right? Tremendous amount of information, both from our attorneys, from the state, from the community. It's been great information. I'm glad to hear all of it. But what we're here for, and again, I don't understand why I get this meeting agenda that says that there's going to be a scheduled vote on this. What are we voting on?
Why do we need to know when they take breaks?
Because last year, we talked about mask breaks to be provided. I can't tell you how many times I heard that mask breaks weren't happening.
Yep, I heard the same thing. And I'm sure they were provided, but I don't think they were provided as regularly as we were led to believe.
Well, that's not for the board to be discussing. That's daily operations. And that's out of our purview. We hire Brian and an administrative staff to execute that plan. The plan is mask breaks, not up to us to say, okay, we're gonna have mask breaks at 9:30 and at 1:30. So I think we're overstepping a little bit in that regard. I would rather get back to the discussion about this policy and making sure we encompass that in this reopening plan so that there is no loopholes or gray area. So that's what I was getting at. So I'll revert back to my question, which was, are we advocating that if a student comes to school without a mask on, we suspend them? Because I'm not in favor of doing that. I'm more so in favor of what Brian talks about, which is calling a parent, sending the student home, and having them make up the work. But we don't have a policy in place to do so. So the question is do we add that to this plan, or do we add it to that policy?
Will they be offered the opportunity to put on a mask? I mean, will
Yes.
a mask be
Yes, they will, yes.
So that's what I'm getting at. I think we need to have something on paper, because right now, according to, last meeting, basically uncovered that we don't have anything written down about that. And I think we need something written down about it. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but
Does CAPE have anything?
not to my knowledge, but I haven't asked.
It's not needed, but if the board feels more comfortable to placing that language in there, then we can put it in there, that as far as what the protocol be
Okay.
if a student refuses to wear the mask.
But does CAPE have anything?
No, they do not. It's up to the individual districts.
And to answer your question, Tim, I agree with you 100%. I don't think we should even be sitting here right now. This is a non-issue. The state has told us what they expect us to do. They have given us no outs. They have, in plenty of legal opinions, told us that it's our way or the highway. And to be perfectly honest, in many districts, they didn't even talk about it at a board meeting. And that includes Regional 7. Regional 7 did not even discuss their plan to open at a board meeting,
Well, they're
correct?
gonna discuss it tomorrow, but the
Okay.
board is not going to vote on it.
Okay,
And some districts, boards are approving the plan, some districts are not.
So I
Region
stand-
7 is not approving the plan. The board is not approving the plan.
I stand
But they will
corrected.
summarize. They will summarize.
But they're not voting on it.
Right.
So without going back again, why this was brought to the board to vote on, I don't know. Right, it was brought to us last week to vote on. I don't know why that happened. At this point now, I don't care. Right, why that happened.
It was brought to the board because we have board members that wanted a say in the reopening plan, or the plan to open. And perhaps we shouldn't have, but in full transparency, as board chair, I want to put it all out there.
Well, and let's be clear, last week, we came here with the intention of passing this. And what happened that night and what transpired that night, we were blindsided with a motion to go against the governor's executive order. So I abstained, and I was questioned that evening about why I abstained. And in the 4 years that I've ever been on this board, I have never abstained from a vote. But because I was blindsided by this motion, we didn't have enough information. We didn't even know if legally our board had the right to do this, nor did we know what the consequences and repercussions would be. So that's why I abstained from that vote. So we weren't just there that night to go against or argue about what was in this plan. There was a very calculated motion that evening, and it put us on a really tough spot, and that's why we're here tonight.
That being said, I'll make a motion to pass the reopening plan.
I'll second.
School year.
I'll second.
So there's a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Why are we going to pass a plan that we have no choice but to pass? That just makes zero sense. Why waste our time? Why are we going to validate a plan that if you agree with the plan, go ahead and vote and approve it. If you don't. But if we have no choice, it's called coercion. It's not called a choice. So that's my opinion. But you can cast a vote if you'd like.
I 100% agree. I don't think there's a reason we're sitting here tonight.
Nope.
But we are. So we can choose to not pass the plan and just go forward with the plan as Brian presented tonight. We don't vote on it. Or there's a motion on the floor and we vote on it. 6 to 1, half dozen the other. For the public that is with us tonight, there's a legal opinion out there from Ms. Frances, from Shipman and Goodwin to Ms. Frances Rabinowitz, Executive Director of the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. It's very enlightening. It echoes a lot of what the opinion that our board received in a private letter that is for us only. But this opinion clears up a lot of the issues that the board had, or a lot of questions the board had, and that the public has had. So in this legal opinion, I'm going to just hit a couple of the highlights. I'm not going to read it. It's 4 pages long, but this was given on August 16th. The current mask mandate is a binding legal requirement. It is law. Executive Order 13A authorizes and requires the Commissioner of Public Health to issue rules for wearing masks in certain settings, including schools. Commissioner of Public Health has issued a rule that specifically requires the wearing of face coverings in different settings, including a rule that requires all individuals, regardless of vaccination status, must continue to wear a face covering at all times when inside public or private buildings K through 12. And the Executive Order 13A confirms that the Commissioner of Education retains the authority to issue such rules. So it is a law. There's a lot of debate on whether it's a guideline, a mandate, a recommendation. It's considered law. Page 2 of this, actions inconsistent with the mask mandate could expose board members to personal liability. If a Board of Education chooses to not follow binding guidance regarding facial coverings in schools, it exposes itself to liability claims by children and others who claim to have contracted COVID because masks were not required in school. Liability for negligence can be imposed when 4 conditions are met. 1, there is a duty of care. 2, the defendant breaches that duty. 3, the breach caused an injury. And 4, the plaintiff suffered that injury. The binding mask mandate inside schools certainly establishes a duty of care for persons in the school setting, and failure to abide by that mandate is certainly a breach of duty. To be sure, a person who contracts COVID would then have to establish that the breach of duty caused him or her to contract the disease. However, with a question, that will be a question for the jury, and a school district that has flouted a mask mandate will not be a sympathetic defendant, meaning we're liable. And we wouldn't really have a leg to stand on if we had to disprove that the student got sick in school or the staff member. There's a lot to this. I thought this was an important note too. Board members should be concerned about personal liability if and when such a claim is made. So that means each of us could be named personally in a lawsuit regarding this. Actions inconsistent with the mask mandate could expose the school district to adverse consequences, including loss of state and federal funds. And that basically talks about the ARP ESSER fund that we plan to receive, and how they can basically strip that from us because our plan does not follow their recommendations. So in conclusion, this legal opinion, as we approach the beginning of the school year, the wearing of masks in schools is legally required. Unless there's a change in this mandate, it's important for school districts and the Board of Education to oversee them and implement this mandate. A decision to not adhere to this mandate would be more than a symbolic action of protest. Such a decision could have significant adverse consequences for the school district and board members personally, as described above. So I felt like there were some points there that were interesting. When the public is asking us to unmask students, they're asking us to break the law. When the public is asking us to unmask students, they're asking us to put ourselves personally on the line, financially. And I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to put my family and everything I've worked for, my business, on the line over a mask mandate. So that's what I have to say on the matter.
Can I No, I was just going to comment on that. I appreciate that, Tim, and I'm not disagreeing with the fact that it's the law and we need to mask require the kids. I did talk to several attorneys this week on my own, along with 2 state reps and a state senator, and I did get some dissenting information from that letter regarding personal liability and potential loss of government funds. I was told that is a bit of a stretch, and Also, just wanted to point out the fact that the Shipman Goodman partner there is Mr. Mark Ritter, Matt Ritter, who is the House representative, majority leader. So obviously that's a little bit on the side of Mr. Lamont.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to say that as far as personal liability goes, I was told that is a 0.000% chance that would ever happen. But I understand that I'm not saying that we're not going to enforce the law. So I just want to be clear.
I also talked to a state senator and I was told the exact opposite. So,
I think that's part of the problem is there's a lot of misinformation out there and shame on the governor for waiting until 9 days or whatever it is before school starts to drop guidelines on us that we are essentially required to follow. But regardless, it's a legal opinion that we have. We pay our attorneys a lot of money to lend us those opinions. We've never gone against a opinion that an attorney has given us. I don't think we should intend to start doing so now, but that's obviously for the board to decide. So, Carl, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Tim, to your comment about, Tim Kleps, to your comment about, education for all children, I agree with you. That's what we're here for. But I've been struggling with that because all week, that concerns me most out of all of this. But I think it doesn't have to be in the plan. I think every case will be managed independently of the others. And, it's a simple rule. You follow the rules, everything's fine. You don't follow the rule. I agree with Tim that we're not going to suspend people. I don't think Brian or the principals have any intent to do that, but I think it's their responsibility to make sure that every kid has an opportunity to learn in each unique circumstance as it applies. And I don't think we need to have it in our reopening plan.
I agree with that, Carl, right? But when I see continuity of services, right, listed in this, right, that's part of it, right? Is we're going to have
True.
students that don't follow the rules. How do we handle it, right? How do we handle it, right? And as I said earlier, there was no discussion last week about providing that child with work to catch up, right? So they maintained, and again, it's let's call it homeschooling, right? That's really what it is, right? And, again, I look at, I'm going to go back, Tim, with the mask break. We have two sides of the coin here, right? We have a big part of our community that don't want masks. A big part of our community that clearly want masks at this point, right? I think we owe it to them to be transparent in what the plan is for mask breaks. And I don't see why we can't spell it out here.
I actually agree with you. I agree with that.
Well, but I mean, doesn't it depend on the weather? Doesn't it depend on the classroom size and other circumstances? The teacher may say, do you guys need a mask break? And the kids say no, versus the opposite. I mean, why should we dictate how they manage this?
That's okay if they say, if the kids say no. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think you have to be,
You've got
it doesn't
kids
have to
that-
be that calculated, but I think that it could be, we could have it in the plan that every,
Last year, mask breaks were every hour, so that would be the plan this
there we
year.
go.
If there's a situation, as Tim and Tom are talking about, please contact your principal immediately, and that principal will talk to the teacher to ensure that they're following that.
We're putting students in a non-air conditioned school, right? K through 6, in a non-air conditioned school. It's going to be 90 degrees for the next 4 days. Who's to say that's not going to change next week, right?
Again, I say it's up to Brian and the administration to manage that. If we're unhappy with, or the public as students or parents are unhappy, that we're here to help. But I don't think that's not why we're here, to dictate that.
So we have two issues that we're discussing here, right? So we have the student coming to school without a mask on and what the consequences are of that, and we have mask breaks and laying that out there. There's a motion on the floor. We're in discussion of it. Do we have intentions of amending this motion? Or do we want to roll with it?
What's the motion again? Can you repeat?
Motion is to approve the plan to return to school. It was made by
The whole
Tony,
plan, okay, the whole plan.
seconded by Carl.
I mean,
Anybody?
we hire Brian and the principals and the staff to manage this. I don't see why we need to go any further. Like Brian said, some districts don't even have this much of a plan.
Shall we go?
Shall we vote? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. If there is nothing else,
I have one last thing.
well, it has to be on the agenda.
We talked about this.
Yeah.
I'm going
It has to be on the agenda, Gil. So if there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn at 7:45? Tom motion, Tony seconds. All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned at 7:45. You gotta bring it up in the meeting.
We talked about this.